Hello, everybody. Welcome to the PCA live filibuster version, our government affairs update. It's been a while since we provided an update on government affairs topics. I'm Joshua Habersky, the executive director. I'm joined by Glenn Loop, who leads up our state advocacy, and Patrick Anderson, who is an integral part of our federal government affairs team. We're going to talk a little bit about state and federal issues and some of the litigation things, but it's been an extremely busy summer for our team. We've conducted 3 events in different areas. We participated in the National Conference of State Legislators, had several hundred folks in attendance for a reception for that, and had sold out events for the RNC and DNC in Milwaukee and Chicago, respectively. So a lot of outreach with lawmakers, potential lawmakers, politicos, and of course, a lot of cigar industry folks. Last week was extremely busy. Glenn was out in Denver, Colorado at the Rocky Mountain Cigar Festival, and I was at the DNC event in Chicago early in the week, and then we did a site visit in New Orleans. A lot of things going on, even outside of government affairs with the trade show. Some new announcements this week on the product hub side with Toscano and that release. So be on the lookout. We're going to keep this very focused on government affairs today. So we'll have another update, most likely in September, about things going on in the organization in kind of a quick hit wonder. I know that there's a lot of stuff that we send out via press release, but we're doing some short form interactive versions, and we might do a Q&A with that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn to give us kind of a state overview.
Thanks, Josh. And this is an opportune moment because we just presented similar information to almost 700 retailers under the smoker friendly umbrella at their annual conference and Rocky Mountain Cigar Festival, as Josh mentioned. And really, what we're doing is we're capsulizing the 2023 2024 legislative season, and we're in preparation now for 2025. So I'm going to give a quick overview of some of the stats and issues confronted in 23, 24, and then sort of give a crystal ball for what we can anticipate and what we're planning for in 2025. So with that, during 23, 24, we tracked 499 pieces of legislation, 499. Of that 499, 404 failed. I'm reminded when I say that of a dear friend who was a deceased member of the Virginia legislature, Jeff Stafford, who used to say, I never considered myself an initiator of great legislation. I just try to kill the bad stuff. And really running defense and having 404 bad bills die is a testament to the industry and its advocacy efforts and the coalitions we built to help defeat harmful legislation confronting the industry. And of that 499, 85 passed and 10 are in legislative limbo. And what's interesting is all 50 states confronted some type of tobacco legislation in one form or another. Of those issues, there were really 9 overarching issues: minimum purchase age, licensing to sell products, flavored tobacco bans, remote seller regulation and taxation, local authority, both pro and con. And that means there were legislatures like Missouri and South Carolina who introduced legislation that would prevent any form of local regulation or enhanced taxation authority, and Colorado, which would have expanded regulatory powers to local governments. And neither side of that advanced on that front. Cigar bar legislation in North Dakota, Connecticut, and numerous local governments um, and premium cigar tax caps in Nevada, Idaho, Montana, and North Carolina, bringing it to 17 states that now have a tax cap policy, which to us gives it the air of normalcy as we're approaching tax cap legislation in a host of new states and carryover states that we'll talk about in just a second. Tax increase legislation, none of them advanced in any state in the union on premium handmade cigars over the last two legislative sessions. And then the capstone issue is generational smoking bans. Uh, it was interesting. We won't belabor the history of this, but it began in New Zealand. It was reversed in New Zealand. It has since spread to different parts of Europe. It was introduced and quickly withdrawn in California. And in the past year, it was introduced in, of all places, a southern state, Tennessee. Where it's caught on, though, is Massachusetts. And what's happened there, because of the decision of the Supreme Court of Massachusetts to allow jurisdictions to ban the sale of all tobacco products, um, it's been allowed to proliferate throughout the state to introduce generational smoking bans, and that means if you were born after X date, normally January of 2007 or 9, you would not be allowed to buy a tobacco product in any way, shape, or form, no matter how old you are, if you were born after that date, which is an absolutely ridiculous proposition. It says if you're 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, and you go to your local cigar shop to buy a cigar to take to the golf course, you wouldn't be allowed to do it, which is an amazing commentary, which creates a de facto state of prohibition. That type of a local ordinance is spreading and being introduced in over 50 communities in Massachusetts. We cross reference our PCA membership with those 50, and there could be 11 cigar shops at risk under such a proposition. And we've got a posted petition that goes to the local boards of health, the local governments, and the state legislators that cover those areas that are subject to this. And we're a part of a larger coalition of tobacco-oriented advocacy groups that are seeking to defeat these types of measures before they spread. It's living proof of how bad ideas do spread in the world of tobacco control policy. So, speaking of which, on our new radar screen for tobacco control issues is, of all places, Florida. Senator Joe Gruters of Sarasota is now threatening that if the recreational cannabis proposition passes a referendum in Florida in November, he's going to introduce a comprehensive, across the board, public places smoking ban. Senator Gruters has never been a friend of the cause. He's introduced smoking ban proposals historically in the state of Florida, which have either not gotten anywhere or provided exemptions for premium cigars and pipe tobacco. But now it's a much more looming, larger threat to those that enjoy premium handmade cigars and pipes in the state of Florida. So we'll be watching this. No bill has been filed yet. It's gotten a lot of media attention because of the senator's public initiation of his, I'll call it a threat, to introduce such legislation if this referendum passes in November. Crystal ball, and I'll close with this. This is where we think things stand as far as anticipated legislation in 2025, which we are preparing for now, working with our retail partners, lining up petitions, outreach to legislators on good and bad legislation. So I'll just give a quick overview of those. Tax cap bills will be pursued in Georgia and Nebraska, as well as carryover legislation seeking tax caps in Illinois, Wyoming, New York, New Jersey, a renewed pursuit of a tax change in Virginia, Delaware, and a tax ceiling bill in Colorado. And we had great discussions with Senator Tom Sullivan of Colorado on him reintroducing that tax ceiling bill there in the 2025 legislative season. as well as hopefully an effort to reduce the tax cap level from the current $1 in the state of Indiana. Cigar bar legislation in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and New York. Massachusetts, again, sort of the problem child in this arena. There's a carryover bill that would dramatically increase the tobacco taxes in Massachusetts, as well as a good piece of legislation. And I spoke with the office of the patron of this bill, and that is a piece of legislation in Massachusetts to remove the authority of these local boards of health to unilaterally either ban the sale of tobacco or implement these generational smoking bans. I think we can also anticipate flavored tobacco bans, new licensing legislation, and local authority legislation in probably at least a half a dozen states going into 2025. So that's sort of the crystal ball piece historically, where I think we're going in January, and we have a lot of work to do to prepare with our retail partners to either support or defeat the legislation that I just mentioned. I'll close also with this one. What happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota is the type of thing that can spread to city halls throughout the country. And that is the lunacy of this proposition that you can only spend 15 minutes sampling a cigar in a local cigar shop. That was in addition to flavor ban proposition and raising the price of other tobacco products. But again, it's like the generational smoking ban. It just shows how bad ideas spread. So, working with our retail partners and brethren associations, we look forward to confronting this type of measure as well as the good bills that can come out of this legislative process in the coming year. Back to you, Josh.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate the state update and all the work that you've been doing there. I'm going to turn it over to Patrick on I know that we have a couple things that happened late breaking just moments before we were joining this broadcast, an update on the T21 front and a few other things on the federal side. And then I'll close off on kind of the litigation update.
Yeah, so there should be a T21 press release coming out any minute now, if it hasn't already. Does anybody remember December of 2019? That was before we even had pandemics and a lot of crazy laws that were enacted shortly after that. But in 2019, in December, Congress first issued the mandate for T21, raising the tobacco age of purchase to 21, and charged FDA with issuing the regulations to implement that law. So fast forward almost 5 years later, FDA has finally done that. And what's probably more significant is what happened in the interim, as opposed to the end result. But let me start with what the regulation now says. Tobacco age of purchase is obviously 21. With respect to premium cigars, this regulation does not affect premium cigars because premium cigars are currently removed from FDA's jurisdiction based on the Meta decision. So it doesn't change that factor, but any other products that are sold in specialty retail stores that are tobacco products, it does apply to them. It also, the new regulation states that any customers that appear under the age of 30, those customers should be carded. And so that's going to be the new standard for requiring an age verification. And it also requires that any vending machines that are still out there, they can only exist in locations where customers are 21 and older. So customers have to be carded at the door. So this would apply more to nightclubs, but also potentially some cigar bars and lounges, if they only allow patrons in that are age 21 and older. But what it really reflects, I think, is this, a sort of a backlash from what we've seen happen at FDA. You know, they were given this mandate in 2019. They put out some enforcement guidance shortly thereafter. And really, thanks to a lot of the great work at PCA, you know, we were able to see that cigars and pipe tobacco were put at the bottom of that enforcement priority. And they actually openly acknowledged in that document, FDA said it's because there really is not a youth access issue there. And, you know, since then, we've also seen the META decision come out, which was based in part on the government's own data, showing that premium cigars really don't have a youth access problem, and the usage patterns aren't consistent with addiction. So, you know, again, it's the industry. We've been saying this for a very long time, but it's good to see these things kind of happen. And then very quickly, we saw FDA kind of shift focus and start talking about things like, you know, flavor bans, and, you know, different different demographics and what products they prefer and how we should try to maybe reduce consumption in certain areas. And it really it seemed to be more of a jurisdictional grab than anything else. It was kind of odd. And we've pushed back very hard on that. And just recently also, you know, the administration has come out and said that they are tabling the cigar flavor rule and indefinitely. They've put it on their long-term rulemaking list, which means it's technically still out there, but there's no foreseeable deadline as to when they're going to pick it up and continue working on that. And again, I think that's thanks to a lot of input from PCA, as well as, you know, a lot of the input that came in from various individual retailers, manufacturers, you know, on the grassroots side as well. So I think that's those are two nice wins that, you know, we have here. But going forward, you know, we still need to stay on top of things, because FDA is certainly not quitting their efforts as a result of this. But, you know, hopefully they will recalibrate, stick closer to what their actual mandate is within the Tobacco Control Act, which is preventing youth access and addiction. And those really aren't our products. So we will continue to remind them of that. And we are also looking forward to a lively discussion with Director Brian King at the PCA show in New Orleans next year.
Thanks, Patrick. And it's important to note that the T21, you know, although it's not, you know, something that applies to premium cigars, most of the enforcement is done at the state level, and there are statutory requirements that have the age of purchase that was raised from 18 to 21, where over 40 states have done that either by specific legislation or by administrative action. You know, we are in favor as an organization for streamlining that as much as possible. And the rationale being is that, you know, if you have certain states that are in that, I guess, window, it creates problems from the data side, and the anti-tobacco groups will use that for data manipulation purposes. Now, because of this age increase, you see a lot of young smokers, that category, they're going up to 30 now in that category, and trying to encompass that to make it look like it's more of an issue. Glenn and I were talking earlier today about some of the data that was reported in the FDA release, and how the enforcement data is minuscule, that they are, you know, putting so much effort into this on the enforcement side to make a mountain out of a molehill, so to speak. Glenn, I know that you had some observations on that. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Well, I'm not going to say it's laughable, but, you know, who in life does anything with 91% efficiency? And that's what it amounts to. And let's just take the larger set of numbers that they put out. They said that they had out of 1.5 million compliance inspections. They issued 134,000 warning letters. Warning letters. Now that includes all tobacco products. So
Nicotine products too.
that's smokeless products. That's cigarettes. And there was a time when I tracked a little closer the warning letters that were issued, and not to name names, but 7-Eleven could have had their own department. And so it affects the convenience store mass market much more than our premium local cigar shops. But let's keep in mind that this number of 134,000 includes every convenience store, every retail establishment in America, 1.5 million inspections, and there was 91% efficiency compliance with those inspections. 91% of there were 33,000 civil penalties leveled out of that 1.5 million compliance inspections, and that's a violation total of 2.2%. And then of the ones that were basically, I guess, banned from selling tobacco products because of multiple violations, was less than 1%. Of the 1.5 million inspections, less than 1% were, and that was like 230 of those, 230 out of 1.5 million compliance inspections. This kind of goes back to a study my old friend Tom Bryant, the retired director of the National Association of Tobacco Outlets, a study that he shared one year with us, and it documented, and I think it was done through like a school administrator association, that the predominant channels and means by which youth access tobacco was not through retail channels. It was through what's known as social channels. Uncle Bob bought it for me. The guy that I gave $20 to outside the convenience store gave it to me, got it for me. It wasn't through an underage, youth going in and buying something across the counter. It was a social source, a known source, was the way that youth have traditionally, through a vast majority of these acquisitions and compliance inspections, acquired their tobacco products. So I think that just dramatizes how, quote unquote, we're not the problem. And I know that through the years of been tracking this, that since these compliance inspections have been going on, that I think I've received less than 5, and I'm not making that number up, less than 5 phone calls from concerned retailers who may have received a warning letter. I think I remember one in Pennsylvania, one in Florida, one in the Midwest, one out west. But I know that it was less than 5 calls that I've received from premium shops throughout the country over the course of over the last decade when confronted with this type of a dilemma. So I think that's a testament to this industry and how it complies with the law, with the regulations, and the diligence that they put forth in things like card check.
Yeah, you would think, Glenn, that with that sort of record, FDA would want to reach out to us and say, hey, how can we create resources in order to aid the industry in complying with all of this? You guys do a great job. Your stores, your specialty retail outlets are not the problem. How do we create systems, and where do you all see these social interactions happening, and what are better ways to do it? We've reached out regularly in our comments to FDA, asking for them to work with us on the front end of these things rather than hear about it afterwards. And unfortunately, it's always radio silence.
Well, just to add to your point, is it's not just the procedure by which cigar shops are carding and enforcing laws and regulations through card check. It's the very foundation of our demographic. Our demographic is not America's youth, and the studies have clearly substantiated that. It's easy to enforce an age limitation when everybody walking into your shop is over the age of 35 to 40. So I think that it's a twofold path. It's proper enforcement at the register for things like card check, and it's the fact that it's a much older demographic nationwide, and it has been historically, traditionally 35 to 65-year olds that find our products more attractive. And it just goes to substantiate America's kids aren't buying premium handmade cigars and pipe tobacco.
Yeah. And I see a question in the comments section. Did FDA have a comment period for T21? They did. They also had one at the before a regulation is promulgated. That's kind of the technical term. It has to go before the White House Office of Budget and Management and their Office of Regulatory Affairs. Patrick and I, along with one of our board members, presented to that office. We presented a written comment as well as an oral comment, kind of talking about what the data says, what the concerns are, and this final rule, which there's a draft. It still hasn't been published formally into the Federal Register, which it will be in the coming days. There is a draft available on regulations.gov, but that final one is very limited in scope. I think one of the concerns when they do things like that is it a grab bag where they have all these other things that don't necessarily pertain to the regulation at hand. Congress passed this. This was signed into law, age increase. That's one of the arguments that we made was keep it limited to the age increase. Don't, add in all of these other things, which they have a tendency to do. If you look at some of the stuff like the tobacco manufacturing product standards, that was something where it leveled probably 12 to 15 different regulations, none of which had congressional authority. And that's why that it's continued to run into issues and opposition from folks. It's important to note one of the other things, in addition to the Tobacco 21 and our slew of federal congressional meetings, Patrick and I are also working on some private sector issues. We are continuing to see some companies adversely treat tobacco businesses, people that sell tobacco products, whether it's done remotely or face-to-face, like certain products and services, third-party providers. We will be issuing a survey to our membership, kind of asking, is it financial services issues? Is it social media? Couple different sectors where we've had member inquiries reaching out to us. We kind of want to get a totality of the problem. We know on the text messaging side, we've talked about it in previous broadcasts with Shaft, that protocol preventing communications and customer loyalty program communications. That's on the forefront. There's been several congressional offices that have taken an interest in that because it isn't just limited to tobacco. It's some other adult products like alcohol and firearms. So the scope of that is a little bit larger, but we're trying to get a good set of facts and information that we can share with these congressional offices. So I would expect a survey of that nature to be released to retail members, next week or the following week. The other big thing on the horizon is September 13th. We have oral arguments in the case. This is the appeal for our litigation. Patrick referenced it. We won challenging the deeming rule and its application to premium cigars. That is the Maida decision. That the FDA is appealing that decision. Oral arguments will take place on the 13th. Another important date to note, if you're in the DC, Maryland, or Virginia area, we are hosting our annual Advocacy Fall Fundraiser on September 25th in Clarendon, Virginia. Tickets are available for that. That helps support a lot of our grassroots initiatives. So we hope that you consider attending and supporting that. We have some great sponsors, vendors. It will be a good time, and I know Patrick, Glenn, and I will be on hand to answer any questions. We're always available should you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Any final thoughts, guys?
I would just encourage everyone to consistently monitor our cigaraction.org page for updated issues and legislation of concern, both pro and con. So pay attention to cigaraction.org, and it will keep you apprised of all of the state and major local issues that we're confronting.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Patrick. We will, hopefully everyone has a good rest of their week, and we will be in touch shortly, and be on the lookout for other updated communications from the association outside of government affairs. A lot of good stuff from that site visit. On the trade show front, membership, that's another important point to note. In September, we will be opening membership renewals up. So make sure that you join the PCA, renew your membership, encourage other shops that may have lapsed in the past. We need to grow this army, and we need to make sure that every possible retailer, as well as associate member, is participating with their trade groups. That's a testament to the industry, and being a good industry citizen, so to speak, is supporting the organizations that support you, including the PCA, the CRA, and other like-minded organizations. Glenn and I just were on a podcast with the Boutique Cigar Association. If you're a boutique manufacturer, that's a great organization as well. We're all working on this together, and we appreciate everyone's support. Thank you all.